So thank you for your kind introduction and the invitation to talk to you here. In the next 20 minutes, I'd like to give you some insight into why science helps you and all of us to understand the world. Let me tell you a bit about myself first. I was born in Munich, and when I was born, I was the oldest grandchild to my father's parents, and especially my grandfather plays a big role in how I became who I am. At that time, he was a bit upset because he was a passionate chemist working in a pharmaceutical company, and he had 4 children. And by the time I was born, all of them were in their 20s, and none of them had any inclinations to be a scientist. He was very disappointed, and I think he swore to push his grandchildren towards being a scientist. And at least he succeeded in half of them. So at family gatherings, when everyone else would sit down and have coffee, he would take me to his office and show me his huge collection of minerals and fossils. And after that, he would collect the dead flies from the windowsill, and we would look at them through the looking glass. So by the time I finished school, it was clear that I would be a biologist. I started studying in Tübingen, and 3 months later, my grandfather died. After 2 years, I changed to the University of Freiburg, where I focused on freshwater ecology. But towards the end of my studies, when I passed all the theoretical stuff and science started to become more practical, it turned out that in freshwater ecology, you could not do the kind of research I wanted to do. Because when you work in ecology, you cannot really do any experiments. You can only measure what you see from 1 year, the changes from 1 year to the next. But it is very hard to really test certain effects. For example, when you have few fishes 1 year and many fishes the next year, it's almost impossible to tell why, because you will have so many factors that influence this and that change. Like you have more predators and more rain and maybe a lower pH value and all these things that influence an ecosystem. So I thought I would be frustrated when I cannot determine the factors that cause and effect relationships. So I decided to prolong my studying for about 1.5 years, and I became a molecular biologist. For my diploma thesis, I worked at the Max Planck Institute for Immunobiology in Freiburg. And in my research, I tried to learn more about the developmental stages of the red blood cells in our body. And it was during that time that I had a key experience for what I'm doing today. Let me tell you, well, as a young scientist, and probably quite a few of older scientists too, or hopefully most of them, well, you think you are one of the good guys. You think about what you could reach with your science. You can get spectacular insights into how the body works, and then one day you might find the crucial cure for cancer or even overcome some genetic diseases. And I thought then that everyone else sees scientists as the good guys too. Well, I was wrong. I found out when a schoolmate came to visit, she had become an actress. When I told her about my diploma thesis at the Max Planck Institute, her first question was, so, and do you mainly work on biological weapons? I was quite shocked. Since then, I've always kept in mind it's good to be a good scientist, but on the other hand, we have to communicate science to the public. We have to explain to the public what we are doing. After my diploma, I started my PhD at the Max Planck Institute for Biochemistry, which is also in München and Martinsried. You might have heard about it. I don't want to get into detail, but I quit after working there for 1.5 years. Because I think so many things went wrong in the department. And well, I thought, if you guys in the department think you have to behave like that, go ahead, but I'm not willing to bear this any longer, and I will not let you steal my love for science. And with this in mind, I started a new PhD thesis in Hamburg, and it took me another 4 years to get my PhD. And of course, it's always tedious and it can be very frustrating to work on your PhD, but I'm really happy I did it that way. I'm telling you this because after not pursuing the freshwater ecology, It was the second time in my career that I dropped something I had put quite some effort into, and I do not regret it, because I do not feel that I fail, but actually I think it's good to take over responsibility and to act than just to accept things as they are. If it's not good for you, you don't have to do it. And it actually made me quite self-confident. So after a few weeks, then a few years further on, after I finished my PhD, a few weeks later, I had my first baby. And I knew I wanted to promote science to the public, and that was about it. So what I did, I applied for an internship at the press office of the Robert Koch Institute, which is the National Health Authority in Germany, because I thought I could learn how to promote science to the public. One of my jobs there was to answer or to forward all the incoming mails to their general email address. And what I learned there is that there's many, many cranks out there who believe a lot of crap. This is wrong. Oh, no, what did I do? This, yeah, you see, the fun part is coming later. And at that time, we had the bird flu epidemic in Germany, and many farmers had to kill their hens or geese, and then you had all these people calling, writing emails, writing letters, proposing miracle cures for the bird flu. They came up with all these sorts of so-called alternative medicine, which was supposed to work, but others denied the existence of viruses. Others really, literally think that the government wants you to get vaccinated, to gain some kind of remote control over your brains. You know, there are so many people out there who believe in unbelievable stuff, yeah. And it's worse than anything you can imagine. So what I learned there is that there are not only people who have no idea about science, but also many, many people who actively reject science and promote the distrust in science. And they are quite well organized, and they did exactly the opposite of what I wanted to do. And in addition, there are a lot of people who make a lot of money while promoting this quackery, and a lot of people who take actual damage from it. So we got letters from people stating that their seriously ill friends stopped taking their medicine because some quack said it was poisonous, and then people died. So after my internship, I knew I would not only have to convey scientific results to the public, but also to try to build trust in science and to raise awareness about the dangers in ignoring science. Around that time, I went to a science communication conference, and someone told me about a then brand new science communication format called Science Slam. A Science Slam is an evening event, and in this event, about 5 or 6 scientists try to explain their scientific work within 10 minutes in an entertaining and understandable way, and afterwards the audience gets to vote. So I organized my first, I was completely hooked from the very beginning. I organized my first Science Slam in 2009, and I've basically done this ever since. So today I organize about 50 Science Slams a year, so one a week or maybe more, sometimes more than one a week, and each of them attracts a crowd of up to 600 people. So that was okay. I think I did quite well in promoting science to the public. But there was still this issue that had always been driving me crazy, the esoteric and pseudoscientific crap people believe in without asking for scientific evidence. By then I had 2 kids, and I saw so many of the other parents, I don't know if your parents are a bit like that, who believed just about anything someone told them and willingly just bought everything any person said they needed. I mean, you have these, many kids wear these amber necklaces, so they will feel less pain when their teeth come through. It does not make any sense, but they sell in millions. So there are a lot of myths on how to raise a child. So I searched the internet to find out if there were any like-minded people out there, and yes, there were. There is a worldwide network of groups called the Skeptics who want to promote science and rationality. So I was very happy that I was not alone. It's the German one. It's called GWUP, die Skeptiker, and it stands for Gesellschaft zur wissenschaftlichen Untersuchung von Parawissenschaften. I think for now 6 years, I'm on their national board, and there is the American part of the international skeptics movement. I think we exist in about 50 countries in the world. Is called Committee for Skeptical Inquiry, and I'm on their advisory board. So right away, after I found out that these people exist, I became a member and started a Hamburg group of skeptics. Since then, we meet on the 13th of every month, so later today, and talk about ways to promote science. We do that because the people from the other side do not dare to leave their house on the 13th, so we are on our own. And of course, there are a lot of problems, and we know that they really cause harms. The pseudoscience really causes harms. But every time someone brings some esoteric equipment or literature or books of some kind, and there's so much bullshit that people believe in, that we actually have a lot of fun. But now I'm trying to explain to you what is skepticism. Well, it is actually a way of thinking. There is a term called critical thinking, which means that you apply scientific ways of gathering information, looking for facts, and asking for evidence to everyday phenomena or claims. And there's a rule in critical thinking that says the more extraordinary the claim, the more vigorously you should ask for evidence and check the facts. So there's a famous story to point this out. Imagine you come into a village you have never been before, and you can see a sign saying horse farm. And you sit down on a bench, and a guy from the village will sit down next to you. And then you hear the clatter of hooves from the direction the farm is. And when the guy says, that's a horse, you probably wouldn't ask any further questions. But when he says, that's a zebra, you should not just nod, you should say, oh, I don't believe you. Let me take a look, and you should go and look if it's true. And maybe it's true. And when the guy says that's a unicorn, you should definitely go there. You should not only take a look, but you should, check if the wings are real, and if the unicorn is real, or if maybe it's just attached and it's not a real unicorn. So this story is there to explain to you that the more extraordinary the claim, the more accurately you should check it. So, but let's take this to a little more theoretical level. What kind of claims exactly are the ones that you can test with critical thinking? What types of claims can be tested with scientific methods? So now I have a few statements, and we will find out if this can be tested with scientific methods. The first one is about the ladybug. In Germany, every child knows that the number of dots on its back indicates how many years it is. So this ladybug is 7 years old. Is this true or not? Can we test this scientifically? Of course we can. We can breed ladybugs and look at the newly hatched ones, and then we will see that also the newly hatched ones come out with 7 dots. So this is not true. So that's a scientific test for this. The next question, a bit more difficult, is does long life milk taste different from fresh milk? And this, many people say, oh, I don't like the one kind, I only like the other kind. Yeah, to find out if there's really a difference, you have to make a so-called blinded experiment. You take two glasses, just label them with A and B, pour one kind in one glass and the other kind in the other glass, and then you need more than one person, maybe like 20 people who try it, and if they guess well beyond 50% right, then you can think, oh well, the scientific evidence supports that they do taste differently. Next question. Is Justin Bieber's music better than Ed Sheeran's? So, can you test this in a scientific way or not? No, because there are no scientific criteria for good music. It is basically just a question of your personal taste. So this is a question you cannot answer with the methods of science. But things can get a bit more difficult. Look at the next claim. The stork brings the babies. True or not? And you can compare you can count the number of storks and the number of babies, and you will get this. And you see it's related. It's not so far away, and you think, well, it might be. But as you might have anticipated, these two graphs, they have different causes, and they are not one of them is not the cause of the other one. That's the same with the next example. It says if you play Mozart to an unborn baby, then this will make your child more intelligent. Scientific studies have also shown that children who listen to Mozart before they are born are actually doing better at school. So what's the reason for this? It's called the Mozart effect. But it's not cause and effect. It is not because of Mozart, because in families with a high level of education, these families tend to listen to more classical music, and these families tend to have, the kids of parents with a higher degree of education usually do better at school. So you should always ask for evidence, but then you have to be careful not to jump to conclusions. So now let's take the critical thinking and questioning to the next level, because our brain is quite good at thinking, but it's even better at deceiving us. I would like to talk briefly about two effects that show that you can trust your own head and what solutions the scientific method has to offer. The first effect is the so-called confirmation bias. We all prefer to gather information that confirms what we already believe to know. And it's very difficult for us to search for information that contradicts our opinion. Perhaps some of you have heard about this in the past few months. There's been a lot of talk about filter bubbles, and especially on the internet. And for example, if you are a right-wing nationalist, I'm running out of time, but speak faster. You will probably read every single article on sexual harassment committed by refugees, and you will absolutely ignore the articles on sexual harassment committed by German citizens. And of course, it's hard to change your worldview, but for the confirmation bias, the tendency to look for information which supports what you think you know, it doesn't even need a worldview, as you can see in this psychological test. It's called the Bayesian selection test, and the theory you want to test is if a card shows a vowel on one face, then its opposite face is an even number. And you are allowed to turn around two cards. So which of the cards shown here do you turn around to test the hypothesis? 75% of people choose these two, the A and the 2. But it's completely irrelevant what's on the back of the 2, because the claim does not say anything what's on the back of the 2. but that's the confirmation bias that leads us to pick these. The correct thing would be to turn around the A and the 3, because only when you find a vowel on the back of the 3, you know that the theory is wrong. And so it's very hard to look for falsifying data. It's always easier to look for data that supports it, and that's tricky and dangerous, and it happens to scientists all the time. It's very hard to overcome this. As a scientist, of course, it would be good if you could have a look at all cards, and also about the filter bubble example before. You should, in a scientific way, you should look at all the events of sexual harassment all together, and then base your base what you think on the whole picture of the data. So the second effect I want to talk about briefly, it's really comfortable that it stops after 20 minutes, so you're not worried anymore, is the placebo effect. You've probably heard of it. The placebo effect means that positive effects, expectations of a therapeutic intervention, like giving a shot or some medication, mean that the patient actually feels a positive outcome. It's for me important to note that we are talking about measurable positive effects. So it's not that a patient is just making this up, but it's a physiological effect. And there are a number of medical treatments based on a placebo effect. For example, homeopathic remedies, which are very popular in Germany and Austria and Switzerland, and they contain practically no molecules of the original substance. So they are placebos. But it's just the time that the person prescribing it talks to you, and all these positive expectations that you connect with them. So how can science help you to find out if a therapeutical intervention works? As we did earlier with the example of the milk, the key to success is blinding the experiment. So no one knows what they're actually doing. In medical research, it's done as follows. Patients with the same disease are randomly divided into two groups, and then one group gets the drug and the other group gets the placebo. Two things are crucial. The drug and the placebo have to look exactly the same, and neither the patient nor the doctors who give the drugs or placebo must know which group they're in, because otherwise the doctors might unconsciously, raise some positive expectations. And it's usually both groups feel better afterwards, and it's just the difference between how much better the patients with the real drug feel compared with the patient of the placebo is what tells us something about the efficacy of the medicine. So homeopathy was quite an obvious example, because if a drug doesn't contain anything, it just contradicts everything about what we know, how the world works. But there are also things that are more difficult, to ask the right scientific questions at the right time, because they do seem plausible at the beginning. This is the last thing I'm talking about. For example, 10 years ago, a group of scientists took a closer look at a surgery that was done hundreds of thousands of times a year alone in Germany. So when you have arthrosis in your knees, then they use arthroscopy to open your knee joint, and they clean it a bit, and then many people say they feel better. And what they did, took two groups, and one of them, they just made a little, in the anesthetized patient, they just made a little cut in the knee and nothing else. And in the end of the trial, they found out that both groups felt the same. They both got better, and this whole surgery, it had risks, but it was completely useless. So this is only this scientific method the consequence of this was, it's not done anymore. The risk for the patients are lower, and the public health system does save a lot of money. So you see, when we think what we think, even in science, what we think is correct now might be proven to be wrong at some point in the future. But it's the power of the scientific method to always ask questions and to test things over and over. So please stay skeptical and always keep asking for evidence. Thank you for your attention.